What is up, everybody? It's Spiker, and in this edition of The Closing Pitch, we talk with Deven Morgan of Driveline Academy. And if you don't know what Driveline is, just Google it, and you'll quickly realize that they are a powerhouse. They have helped move this industry forward on the research and development side of things. And we have split this conversation up into two parts. We actually had 45 minutes on the docket, and we went way over. And then when looking back at the footage, there was a clear line where we could break this conversation into two different episodes. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And also, please give us a review. Enjoy the conversation.
Let's finish it.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of The Closing Pitch. My name is Spiker Helms. Across from me is David Burkby. This is a show about people, culture, and how to create a winning lifestyle. We have a guest for you today, Deven Morgan of Driveline Academy. I am a huge fan of Driveline from a standpoint of just the research side. Probably the first time I've ever seen a sports company really go all in on research and actually having hard data behind the results, where it was more of just like a guess, like, oh yeah, he throws harder now. That's a good job.
Yeah,
we did a really good job.
Yeah.
And then they do the same result, and then the other kid doesn't get the result, and they're like, oh, well, it still works. So keep throwing that ball. But before we start and diving into the questions, the biggest goal that I want out of this episode is really do a deep dive from the teaching side, mentor side, the training side, but more importantly, from the player's standpoint, and how to really deep dive into skill acquisition and skill mastery. So without further ado, Deven, give us a little bit of an intro on background of who you are and how you got to Driveline.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you guys for having me, man. I really appreciate it. I did smash the like button with my elbow, so I'm trying to get in with the gang. I think first and foremost, I'm a dad. Like anybody else in this country, I grew up, played baseball. I loved baseball, and I was done with baseball before I was 17. It's one of those things in retrospect where it's like, I think the kind of the path of my experience in the game, as an adult, you kind of go back and it's like, oh, I wish I could tell my teenage self to make this choice and this choice and this choice. But like, the great thing is that when I had kids, and I was fortunate enough to have kids that are like, first of all, happy and healthy, but secondarily, they happen to love baseball too. I went into that. It's like, all right, well, now I have two people who want to do as good as they can in the game, and I'm not entirely beholden to anything that I learned because I wasn't that good. I think a lot of guys that get to like the highest levels of the show are very strong advocates about the stuff that worked for them, and they kind of just want to like copy and paste that onto another athlete without a lot of consideration for how that individual athlete might be different than you. And that variability is 100% in play, even with like people you make. Like my kids don't move the same way that I do. They're just different and unique. So when I came into it as a parent, it's like, all right, well, I'm just going to coach Little League because if I'm going to be driving them to practice, I might as well be there and help. And I have a decent, at least I thought, right? Like that's that kind of that acquisition of knowledge thing.
It's the Kruger effect, like, Dunning-Kruger effect.
I know what I'm doing. Yeah. And then it's like, oh no, I really don't know anything. But it forced me to kind of go like, all right, well, I have an extreme desire to do the best that I can for my kids and the rest of the kids that I'm coaching. Let me just like look into the marketplace of ideas and try to figure some stuff out. And that starts with like the old favorites, baseball, the Cal Ripken way, obviously Ted Williams, Science of Hitting. The Ron Polk, the big giant, like baseball Bible, like you do all that stuff and you try to go like, all right, well, like what seems directionally accurate to me. and then what seems valid and what works. And then, somewhere along that path, I found Driveline. And for me, Spiker, much like you, like this approach to just like a research driven process really resonated with me, because it no longer becomes, this is what I'm doing because I'm just like dogmatically attached to this idea, like religion. And it's this other thing where like I just do the stuff that in this moment of time I believe to work the best. So found Driveline, dug into the blog, the Jigger Sports stuff at the same time, Craig Hyatt, all these guys, like on hitting Twitter back in like '09, that were like really putting out a ton of good content, and Driveline just happened to be local to me. Then I saw that Driveline was doing a youth clinic, and Driveline's like easily like 45 minutes to an hour away from my house. But I have two children that are like, they love the game. And my son specifically was like a little 8-year-old baseball psychopath. And we did the thing where you go to kind of the local camps and clinics, and you go, and some of that stuff is good. Some of it's bad. Some of it is like potentially like litigious, like, because it's just like unsafe. So it's like, all right, well, these guys are really, really smart. Let me go down there. First day we walked in the gym. Kirby Good, who was like a really like old school Driveline guy, was like transitioning to be a hitter at the time, and just like casually hit something like 111 miles an hour on the hit tracks. You had pro ball guys, Dan Comstock, Max Dudo, Max Garrett, Eric Downey, Eric Kozak. They were finishing the pro guy hitting group, and then the youth group started. So my little like soon to be 9-year-old son, walks in the gym, and he sees, Dan Comstock is just like casually ripping stuff like 350, 380, 400 or whatever. And then Dan would go into the weight room and like warm up benching 315. I can't provide that type of experience to my children because I didn't play high level baseball. I'm never going to be able to check that box. But what I really enjoyed about Driveline was not only like this commitment to the stuff that works, but also the fact that like there's guys around there where my son can like see up close what a professional baseball player looks like. It's not something you just kind of engage with on the TV. You get to see how guys work. You get to see how diligent they are. You get to see their commitment to their craft. And like, it was just an experience. It was just so unique that I essentially like changed my entire professional trajectory. About 6 months later, I took a job working as the office manager in Driveline. And then over the course of the next like 6 months, started doing more of our youth stuff. And then eventually took on the director of youth baseball role.
What were you doing before that?
I was running my own business. I was running a family business with my uncle, selling camera accessories online. I have been an office manager. I have done internet sales. I've done graphic design, website design, computer repair, network. Like, I've done a lot of stuff.
So you did a total rehaul. Like you did a complete reversal of what you were going to do, and you just loved what was going on at Driveline and made the switch.
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate enough when I started taking my son down there to develop some relationships, and man, God bless those guys that were on the floor at that time. Jason Ocharts, who's a Phillies minor league hitting coordinator, Max Gordon, Tanner Stokey, Joel McKeithen, who's now with the Phils, and he's been promoted to their big league club. Brian Leslie, who's with the Brewers. Those guys were running the Driveline youth sessions. And like I said, God bless them, that I kind of hung around and asked questions, and I hopefully wasn't super annoying. So that, about 6 months later, when the opening kind of came up to go in on the admin on the ops side as the office manager, Jason Ochart forwarded my information over to Mike Rathwell, our CEO. Mike reached out. We had coffee a couple times, and I kind of told my wife, I was like, I think this might be a thing. And then Mike offered me the gig, and I was just like, yes, we're going to change everything to go work at Driveline. Because it's just like, I mean, once you get around those type of men and women and that type of culture and people who are just so relentless about like trying to improve their players and improve the game. I mean, I was already at that point, I was like probably coaching Little League for 7 years or something like that. Like, how would you not want to do that? You know what I mean? Just to be in the room with those guys and get a chance to get better as a coach and learn and kind of and also like prove the stuff that you think is actually correct. And sometimes it's not, but that's okay.
The first time that I ever saw one of your tweets, it was you putting sensors on your son, and had the sensors on his body while he was throwing, and that was the first time that I got introduced to your account, and you got a lot of heat on that tweet. And when looking at it, when I first saw it, I was like, "Oh, dang, that's crazy." And then I started really digging into it. I was like, "That's actually really smart." Because he's trying to figure out the body motion of his, I think at the time your son was 9 or 10. But a lot of people were like, you can't do this. This is cruel. You shouldn't be doing that to a child. It was very interesting because it goes against everything that you're taught when you're younger as a coach. Like, oh, they're just kids. You got to make sure that it's having fun. But you took it a little bit step further, and I'm assuming you made it like a game for him and be like, hey, let's just see how it looks. And every kid loves seeing their video and loves
100%.
seeing themselves. And then you put them into a 3D chart with like the different sensors, like a game, like a video game. It becomes more dynamic, and then the kid starts realizing, oh, that's what I actually look like when I throw a ball. So can you dive into that tweet and kind of share a little bit of a story on that? I'll link that tweet in the show notes too. I just thought it was a really good conversation starter for player development in general.
Yeah, and I think player development is the core operating principle, right? So yeah, when we first started training at Driveline, we would do one throwing motion capture session before they left kind of the program, right? And we started expanding that into a longer off-season training program, and then we got a chance to do effectively like a pre and a post test. Because what I want to try to know is it like not only like are we throwing harder? I mean, let's assume that that's going to happen, and generally it's going to happen because of two things. One, because the Driveline stuff works. Two, it's going to happen because kids just naturally grow. I mean, that's just going to happen naturally, right? But what we wanted to try to see was like, are we actually throwing better? Like that is really the meat of the question that we're trying to answer. The reason that we do a markered motion capture assessment with anybody that we train at Driveline, youth, high school, college, or pro, is because we want to quantify how are you moving right now. Just in a very simple sense, I don't want to have my assessment of any athlete be driven strictly by what my stupid old eyeballs show, right? Like there's a lot of problems to that, right? Stuff happens really, really fast, especially when you're talking about elite level guys, man. They just move really, really fast. It's hard to see all the type of component pieces and just rely on my eyeballs. Yes, there are coaches who have decades of experience on a field, and they're very, very good at that stuff. The problem that can enter into that equation, though, and I'm not trying to paint with a broad brush and say that every like long-term coach exhibits this flaw, but some of them do. You see one guy that moves one way, and that's good. You see other guys, and then you just kind of go like, well, everybody should move like that, right?
It's recency bias.
Right.
That's what it is. It's biases, and I'm reading a book right now, Think Fast, or Think Slowly and Fast. It's by Daniel Kahneman, but it's a psychology book on our biases and how we actually see things. And he talks about system 1 and system 2. Baseball coaches are definitely in that category of we have biases. We like what we see, and then majority of the time, it's mostly what we recently see. It's not what we've saw in the past.
And I think it's important to emphasize the fact that, like, I think that type of bias comes with the best intentions. Like if you see a guy that has a healthy career and they produce at a high level, why wouldn't you want like the next athlete that you interact with to kind of exhibit that same movement? I think the problem is that man, people are just different. This is the same thing before, right? If all three of us went and threw in a motion capture lab tomorrow, I, number one, guarantee you I will throw slowest. But number two, I can guarantee you that the positions that we're going to get into are going to be different because they're specific to what we bring to the table, right? Our muscular system, our skeletal system, and our ability to like sequence our bodies efficiently. I am very inefficient as a thrower. I have like no layback whatsoever. I've separated the shoulder twice. Man, it's just not going to happen. So my body has to kind of compensate in different ways to try to still throw the ball hard. For someone that is a better athlete, first of all, but also younger and doesn't have a twice separated shoulder, you're able to probably move in a more efficient way. All of us just kind of like, we bring stuff to the table, right? So coaches, I completely understand the reason for that bias, right? Because you see something works and you want it to work for another person. If you were like a big Tom Seaver guy growing up, you think probably it is possible. It is possible you would look at every pitcher like, hey man, we should just focus a lot on drop and drive, right? That was Tom Seaver's thing. He got a lot of linear movement towards the plate. That back knee got really low to the ground. Here's the problem. That worked for Tom Seaver. There is probably some like genetic reasons for why he was able to do that. And I don't have biomechanics on Tom Seaver. I'm also not a biomechanist, but here's my guess. We know that there's a lot of research out there that proves when guys get excessively linear in their deliveries, to some degree, it can kill a rotational velocity, which is a fancy way of saying like actually turning torso, thoracic spine. Rotational velocity is a really high contributor to thrown ball velocity. So if you are really, really elite at rotating, it is possible that you could have like a little bit more linear movement towards the plate and still have enough rotational velocity to still throw the ball really hard. Not everybody is going to have that same like genetic lottery ticket. So if you go like every thrower should work on triple extension, it is possible that some of those kids are going to be good enough at rotating that even if they overly optimize for like the linear movement towards the plate, that they can still rotate enough to throw the ball hard. But it's also possible you have some kids that aren't like that. And what you're doing is you're like robbing Peter to pay Paul. We are overemphasizing one aspect of the delivery and not in consideration of what we really need is like a full body proximal to distal. This is the big segments to the small segments sequence. That is the way that you have guys move most effectively, and the way that has to, in a best case scenario, that those decisions are made like at an individual level, because in so much as you have a Tom Seaver, you also have a Tim Lincecum, and you also have a ton of other guys that move funky and weird and are still able to compete at a really, really elite level. And I think one of the things that you guys had on kind of the notes for kind of talking today was like, how do we train mechanics or do we train athleticism? The root problem with training kids that are like prepubescent is we really don't know where they're going to look like when they are young adults and teenagers because their bodies are changing so fast. Additionally, young kids are just generally not that great at controlling their bodies, or they're not as good as they're going to be when they're out of like this peak height velocity phase where they're constantly growing and they're constantly learning how to calibrate the way that their bodies move. So understand the animal. If that's what we've got, am I best suited for that kid to go like, these are the mechanics that work for you right now, without any consideration of the mechanics that are going to be best for that kid when they're old enough to actually refine them? Or do I give that kid a very simple goal? Let's hit the target. Let's hit that target as repeatedly as possible. And let's do it at a level of intent that kind of reflects the way that you're going to have to pitch in the game. Because that's what the game demands,
That's what I always felt like when dealing with young players, is that it was Play-Doh and I could mold them however I wanted to. And then literally when they left, the Play-Doh just smushed down and then it was just done. Then they'd come back and I'd do the same exact thing. And this is when I was younger and teaching. And then finally I started realizing what you're talking about. I couldn't put it so eloquently that you did, but I just tried to gamify everything and just try to get them to compete in a way to where they were training, not necessarily destroying their bodies, but more importantly, trying to get into the positions that I know and my knowledge, and trying to get them into that position. And then later on down the road, when they get to 14, 15, a lot of the players be like, oh, this is exactly what we did when I was like back in the day. And I was like, yep. Now we can actually talk about it.
Yep. And the way that you can kind of like level up that same concept is is do the same thing, train around competition, train around intent, obviously be able to moderate that intent so that we're not constantly like burning the candle at both ends, but we can put them in constrained positions or introduce different throwing implements that are going to kind of give them that stimulus to go like, this is the constrained position that you're going to start in, and we're going to kind of like see how your patterns change and adapt over time within this constraint. Um, it's 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 it is a longer path. I will 100% agree that it's a longer path and it's a very different path. But what we're trying to do, again, is like preserve as much athleticism as possible as these kids develop. I remember as a kid, like you're throwing and the coach is like, well, your elbow's here. I need it to be here, or like depending on whatever the coach is. And it's like, look, man, if I field a grounder and I got a runner going to first, if I come back here and I'm thinking about the position of my elbow, I'm done. Like I'm cooked. That is how kids are going to get yipped up, and like don't want to do that. What I can do is like put that kid in constrained positions and give them things like plyo balls that are going to help them get this pattern adaptation for where we're going to get to over time. And in doing so, it is a longer path. I 100% agree, but we're going to get there preserving the maximum amount of athleticism possible during a period of time when kids should be free to learn how to move fast. Because what are the consequences, right?
And I like what you're saying there, because you're basically keeping individualism alive to where everybody is different. And that's okay. And that path is a longer path. Of course, you could teach everybody the same and you'll probably win more games this season, but you also might be putting half or more of your team into situations that might be detrimental to them down the road. And you don't know that yet.
And I think the thing that is like constantly under indexed for is that down the road path. Because youth baseball is played in a very specific environment with very specific competitors. You're talking about 12 and under kids playing on fields that are very small. It's Little League, you've got the 46-foot pitching distance, 60-foot bases. Pony is like 50-70 and 54-80. But that leap from those small fields, which is like typically like a 7,000 square foot in total, to like a 27,000 square foot 60-90 field is incredibly, man, it is just, it's a sea change in play space. Because this field changes so much, you have to be prepared to make that transition. And if you look at a place like the Aspen Institute, they've done studies through their Project Play initiative, talking about like this drop off in youth sport participation. And baseball, if I remember correctly, is like the number 2 offender in terms of the number of kids that we lose. We lose.
It's I saw it. I looked at it the other day. We actually are in a decline on the youth level, and we're actually on a plateau from the high school level in the last 3 to 4 years. I could talk about that for days on like what I think is happening, but it is kind of worrisome. Like we are still a really popular sport, but at the same time, when you chase kids away from like, oh, don't do that. You're doing it all wrong. They're going to freak out and they'll be like, I don't want to play this anymore. That guy's crazy.
So you present youth players this ecosystem where they're constantly told that their mechanics are bad. We like hyper incentivize the consequence of when they're competing as if that's really a thing. And then we also under index for like the long-term skills that they need, skills at scale, which is like my thing. We constantly under index for the skills that they need to compete in this different play space. And then we lose whatever, it's like 1.2 million kids a year in that transition from like 12 to 14. And everybody's just like, we just can't do anything. And it's like, look, man, I realize that we have to control for like the way that travel ball is affecting recreational play at the youth level. And that's probably a thing that we could talk about just in and of itself for like an hour. Yeah. But absent that specific issue, my whole preposition for like the last, God knows how long, is just like that we are under preparing kids to make a viable transition from a youth space into like the play space that they're going to be in for the rest of their lives if we keep them in the game. And if we do a better job of that, we just catch more fish. Well, some of those fish are going to be very big fish. Like because we're not running kids out of the game when they're like 11 years old because their coach is a psychopath and they've just been taught to like hit like worm burners through the 4-hole as if that's going to play in infinity, and it doesn't, because you get onto a 60-foot 90 or 60-90 field, and now the kid that plays second base on the varsity team, well, he was a shortstop. He was at shortstop on that little league team for as long as he was. Now he's playing in 2. That's an easy out. 4-3, you're done. Because we just never kind of give kids a stimulus that like, you should probably try to hit the ball really hard, like, because better things are going to happen. And yes, I understand that there's a ton of layers to that and situational stuff, et cetera, et cetera. But generally, moving the bat fast and hitting the ball hard is like never a bad thing. So why would we not embrace the opportunity when there's like really no consequences to speak of to actually train that thing?
Kids just want to compete and they want to show you what they can do. That's literally what they want to do. I want to show you what I can do. I want you to. They want to try to impress their peers and their coaches. Like, this is what I can do. And then when you start giving too many mechanical recommendations, it ends up becoming where they lose that confidence and they're like, I really just don't want to show anybody what I can do now. That's what it gets to.
It's tough. I mean, I literally this happened last night. One of the kids on our 13U team came up to me, and he said, he's like, so tell me about the Driveline swing design. And I'm like, what? Because that's right? You know, we can bring in high school and 8-up players and essentially give them like a one-on-one hitting session where we're trying to quantify current term performance and can make recommendations on things that they could focus on to improve that performance, right? It's not just like a one-on-one lesson where it's like you came in and you hit for 45 minutes at like a D-bat or whatever, and you just leave. We give you like an MLB style report to kind of make you understand what you're good at and what you struggle with, and then make specific recommendations to improve that. So this little 13-year-old had obviously like been, you know, screwing around on the Driveline webpage, and he saw that swing design. He's like, well, tell me about that. And I'm like, well, okay, you know, it's something we typically do for the older kids. I was like, so now I'm asking questions. Like, well, why are you interested? It's like, well, I feel like I haven't got a good barrel in 2 weeks. And I'm like, to your exact point, that kid wants to walk out of our hitting sessions being able to talk to his mom or dad or sibling or grandparent or whatever. Oh man, I hit the ball so well today, right? He wants to show someone that he's doing well, and he feels like he's not doing that right now. The problem is that, like, again, I think most 13-year-olds' ability to like take a lot of mechanical cueing without pulling motor output off the table is a tough scene. That is something just kind of research proven principles suggest that when you have kids getting taught in what's called like an internal cueing fashion, so again, being kind of internally aware of the configuration of your body, the way that older athletes solve that problem is by pulling motor output off the table. So do I think that problem is like more or less effective with like younger kids who have even worse ability to control their bodies? I'm pretty sure that that's the case. So I was like, dude, here's the deal, man. You need to keep your intention very, very simple. Get on time, move the bat fast, hit the ball hard. What I want you to do is we're going to learn how to sprint by sprinting, because that's the path. Like, if you look at, you know, there's this, I can't remember what the Twitter account is, but it's been posting like a lot of like old like scout footage of like current and past MLB players.
MLB,
Yeah,
you guys know what I'm
coverage
talking
or
about.
something, or I just saw it.
Yeah, they just posted Andrell Simmons, and that was the game that I was playing in, and I was in the background.
But like, if you look at basically all that stuff, other than the Mike Piazza clip, because it's like Mike Piazza like taking like really bad hacks and like a garage hitting setup or whatever, almost all of those guys have elite movement speed. Like they posted, maybe it was Andrelton Simmons or somebody, one of the really young kids, like taking like crow hop throws from right field, throwing to third base. His arm speed is preposterous, and he's just making these throws from right field to third, like on a line. It's like the Ichiro or the Yasiel Puig throw from, you know, years and years ago. And he was just trying to get drafted. The guys that are the best in the world are generally really good at moving fast. That That's what they do, man.
Well, and that's what scouts are looking for. That's what they're looking for. Is I don't want the clean guy. I want the guy that can move fast. What's the tool that moves fast? Is it your feet? Is it your arm? Is it your barrel? What is it? If I can point to one of those, I know that you're probably going to be a dude, and we can clean you up along the way.
And by saying that those things are important, I'm not saying that all the other things are not important, right? By saying that like movement speed is fast, I'm not saying that mechanics aren't important. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that bat speed is fast and like being able to find barrels isn't important. That's preposterous, right? Like that no one is making that argument. What we do want to do is just like understand, from a first principles approach. What do the best athletes in the world do? They're really good about having baseball-specific skills at a high rate of speed. Okay, so what's the opportunity for me running a youth academy of 220 kids? Again, if I'm not embracing this opportunity that I have with young kids because the context of competition should be so insignificant, that's the period of time. And then we can continue kind of like the longitudinal accuracy of kind of keeping that program the same. They're going to get older. They're going to get better at controlling their bodies. We can get more refined with skill acquisition. But what I don't want to do is have a kid that's like 17 years old and he throws like high seven or like low sevens. And he's like, I want to play D1 baseball. Like, hey man, somebody just lied to you if they thought that was a thing. And the tricky part is that again, because the level of competition in baseball ramps up so fast, so significantly, you could be low to mid sevens in high school with like good location and good breaking stuff and probably get a ton of outs because high school hitters, depending on where you are and depending on the competition level, aren't making you pay when you leave something over the middle or they don't have movement solutions to get good barrels on stuff on the outer third, etc. So it's like you see these parents on like these Facebook like travel ball recruiting groups and they're like, little Tommy, little Jane, throws 72, 76, and it gets tons of outs. And I can't understand why colleges aren't interested. And it's like, because they had kids throwing upper nines, right? They had kids throwing upper eights. And their secondary stuff is just as good as your kids, but your kid lacks like 10 miles an hour of output. So how did we end up here? Like, what are the opportunities that we had to not only drive skill acquisition, but drive motor output along the way in parallel with it over the last 10 to 12 years? We got a really long window with kids, but if we don't embrace that opportunity, then they end up like basically at the finish line for trying to play at the next level, and they're deficient in really, really important stuff.
Well, this is a good segue into the conversation that this is probably one of the most important conversations that I've really want to hit on is what narratives about developing 6 to 14-year-olds do you love right now, and which ones are you concerned about? Because we all see the Facebook posts on the groups, and then Twitter, obviously, and then Instagram. What narratives do you like, and which ones do you not like right now?
I mean, the one that I don't like, I guess this is there's a lot. There's probably a lot that I don't like. I'm an opinionated man. I make apologies for that. I think the one that's kind of like to the front of my mind right now is actually related to like exit velo and hitting and bats. So this is going to get a little bit in the weeds, so I'll try to kind of go slow. Kids generally from 14 and up have to swing drop 3 BB core bats, right? Or they have to swing wood. And that's at the same time that they're making this transition to a 60 and a 90-foot field, right? Simultaneously, a lot of like the tournament activity in the travel ball space from 13U down is using the USSSA bats. USSSA bats, regardless of kind of like the weight, right? So even if you're swinging like drop 5, so 5 ounces less than they are long, USSSA bats, that USSSA bat is graded on what's called their BPF standard, right? Bat performance factor. Baseball bats in baseball are supposed to be BPF 1.15. Softball is 1.2, if I remember correctly, right? A BPF of 1 is supposed to be a brick wall. So these USSSA bats are really, really, really hot. especially compared to most wood bats. Dr. Alan Nathan, who's done a ton of like physics related research, I think will say that like wood bats have on a BPS scale, it's like a 1.03 to 1.05. If you have kids who are 13 years old swinging bats that are like night and day in performance between the bat that they have to swing next, we are not giving them an honest picture of what they're performing as a hitter. It is that performance is artificially inflated simply by the implement, which is why you had the big guys in the room, Little League and Pony, make the switch to the USA bat standard. Now, at the same time, you still have travel ball tournaments that are running U-trip bats for 13-year-olds, and you can look at like some of these big showcase events, and these kids are hitting homers in MLB stadiums with like these 2017, 2018, the last year before we started paying a little bit more attention to the validity of the standard. These are like $2,000 bats on the used market because their performance is so high. So I think the narrative, to answer the question that I have a problem with, is this kind of, again, we're parents and we have the best of intention for my kids, right? Like I met a girl in a bar. We made people, and she's the love of my life, right? Those two people that we made, I want them to have the most success in every facet of their life, and baseball is included in that. And if I have some money, yes, man, I have bought bats for my kids that are really that are those type of bats, like the U-Trip-SA bat. I have a U-Trip Combat DeBomb. I have two Combat B1s. If anybody's really deep in like the youth bat space, they're going to know what I'm talking about. But generally, when we're training seriously, we are training with USA bats and we're training with wood bats because again, that's the path. That is the thing that they need to acclimate themselves towards in terms of like the long-term goal. So like this.
So I just looked it up. I just looked it up right now. The DeMarini Zen 2017. It has emojis on it. It's on eBay. Has a bomb and a rocket emoji. And it's now going for $365 on a bid, and there's 6 watchers on it right now. and this bat is used.
Yes, that used bat is probably going to go for like $500-$600 all day long. And again, because you're talking about parents, people like me who love their kids, and I want to equip my kid for success. The problem is again, just like, to what degree am I filling out for this current term and not giving my kid like a real honest perspective of like, what they're doing towards like the long-term thing. And it's like, it's like the dads are like, well, if you can afford to buy a Ferrari, you should buy one. And like, sure. If I worked really hard and I could afford to buy a Ferrari, I would love to have a Ferrari in my garage. It's like this testament to what I have achieved. And like, I get that. It's a little bit different when we're talking about an implement that has a really significant impact in like sport performance, because it's just, man, there's a lot of smoke there. There's not a lot of meat, but there's a whole lot of smoke.
I've seen that forever, where kids go out and they're talking at a 13 and 14U age group, and they go out and they hit 15 bombs because they're playing on small fields with these super hot, what I call trampoline bats, that literally you can just get out front on a ball a little bit and it's out. And then they come to a high school tryout and we go, no, you don't try out with that one. Here's your BB Core Drop 3. And they're like barely getting it out of the infield. And dad's not quite understanding. Well, you never translated. You never taught that. There's a different swing to that. There's a different methodology to how you actually have to approach hitting a baseball with that type of bat, because it's a drastic difference. So my question to that dad is, okay, you can pay for the success of your kid at 13 and 14U, but what are you then paying for in the future?
Right. And how do we define that success, right? Which is kind of another question. And to full transparency, the first time my kid ever hit a ball over a little league fence was with a 2017 Combat bat that was crazy hot.
Yeah.
It was a really, really special moment because since he was like out of the womb, the kid wanted to hit a ball over a fence, and he finally did it. And I was so, man, I wouldn't train that moment for $1 billion to be able to be there for it. In the last 12 months, And even within that hitting session, right? He was hitting with that combat bat. He was also hitting with his USA bat. In the last 12 months, we've made this transition to where like now we don't, we haven't done a lot of swinging of those U-trip bats lately because now we are actually in our off-season program, and now he's hitting balls over that same fence with his USA bat. He's 12 years old now. He's going to be 13 next year. He will not still be playing on a field that's like 200 to 225 foot fence line. He's going to be playing on bigger fields, but he's got the ability to drive the ball 200 to 225, 250 or whatever feet. Hitting the ball hard and hitting the ball far is good. I mean, yes, you want to be hitterish along with that. You got to find a way to hit something hard on the backside. You need to be able to understand situations. Like, again, all that stuff is important. The core principles of like how we develop effective hitters and effective baseball players probably hasn't changed a lot in the last 100 years. Or in terms of like the intention of what we're trying to get. The differences of the methodology of how we get there, and what we're trying to do with the Driveline Academy and our approach to youth baseball is, again, like embrace this kind of really singular opportunity you have before the level of competition ramps up.
So how does a parent really dissect through all this? Because from getting the right coach, teacher, mentor, program, because I know there's a lot of parents out there that like, I just want the best for my kid, and all this sounds great. Like, Deven, you sound awesome, but at the end of the day, what do I do? Like, I love the information, but what's my action item? How do I actually go search for this? Obviously, Google's a good resource, but at the same time, I don't know what's right and what's wrong, so I only know what I know.
If there was anything that I could change with like the Thanos like snap, I think I would change parents in this country to not have their definition of success for their child's youth baseball experience be predicated solely on wins, and it would be solely on skill development and like emotional validation.
Emotional validation. Go down that route. Emotional validation. Can you explain what you mean by emotional validation? Because I think that's a very important point.
So there was a quote few years ago. I'm a Dodger guy. Justin Turner has been just like a complete revelation since he got DFA'd by the Mets. He's been a huge impact bat for the Dodgers. Justin, if I remember correctly, trained with Craig Wallenbrock and really just changed his approach at the plate. And there was a quote from a few years ago where he was like, if I went 0 for 3 on the day, but I had 3 hard hit balls, I can't remember if he said 3 hard hit balls or 3 hard hit balls in the air. He was like, I feel like that's a good day. Pete Rose probably wouldn't give you that quote, like guys of kind of that era were really defined by like box score outcome. And like this game, I have to produce, and I'm gonna kind of do anything I can to check that box. And I'm not saying that production is bad. What I'm saying is that Justin Turner, I think what I take away from that quote is he has a little bit more runway for the way that he's kind of understanding his performance, right? If he's hitting the ball hard, I think that can tell you a couple different things, right? Pitch selection is probably good, approach is good, movement and mechanics are good, output was good. And what essentially he's saying is that, like, look, if I know that I do that repeatedly enough, the ball's going to find a gap. It's either going to find a gap or it's going to go over a fence. Good things are going to happen, even though I didn't produce anything that shows up in the box score. That to me is like the adult version of emotional validation, right? You went out to the field, you competed, and yes, you did not check a box in the box score, but you felt really good about the stuff that you could control. That's what you can control as a hitter. The pitches that I hit at, the approach that I take, and putting myself in a position to succeed. And there is several landfills worth of data at the MLB side that just prove that, like, hitting the ball hard is good. Hitting the ball hard produces better outcomes at the elite level, right? For the youth side, I think oftentimes as parents, we tend to like evaluate our player in our youth team experience the same way we think about like the local MLB franchise. I've been in the stands at like local tournaments and I've heard parents that are talking about, the whatever their team is, Johnny's Shake Shack, Burger Emporium, 11U, triple black
Scout team,
diamond, Onyx Elite.
Elite. It has to be. It has to have elite in it. If it's elite, you know it's legit.
Yeah, I mean that's how you know. That's it's like anyway. And I've heard parents that kind of talk about the performance of this team of prepubescent children who are like, some of them are like within 12 to 24 months of getting removed from getting like bedtime stories. And they're talking about these teams the same way that they talk about their franchise. Oh, we're just, the bats are cold right now. And, Timmy's just lost it. He's bad in the 6 hole. And it's like, these are children, right? But oftentimes those children are only going to understand their performance through what we communicate to them, right? Years and years and years ago, this was a Matt Lyle quote where he was like, the best thing you can do when your kid gets in the car after the game is go like, man, I loved watching you play.
100%.
100%.
And I will just say, all credit in the world to Matt being one of those guys back in 2009 that I found and just like really started to kind of think about like the way that I'm reacting to my child's sports performance. Am I doing that in a way that is like emotionally considerate to them? Am I doing that in a way that like gives them validation for their efforts? Am I sending that signal from the top? Because I can talk about emotional validation from kids until I'm blue in the face. But then if my kid gets in the car and he went like 1 for 4 on the day and I'm reading him the riot act about all the things that he or she did wrong, I am not sending signals in consideration of me wanting for that kid to feel validated.
Would you say it's picking out one thing that they did really good, no matter if it was a play on the field or them being the first one out of the dugout or them hustling down the line? Would you say that that's what you mean by like emotional validation? Is like, hey, at least give them one thing hey, you did awesome at this. To listen to the second part of the Deven Morgan interview, it'll be releasing next week. If it is already past that time, it's past 2021. It's already there for you. So go ahead and switch over to that podcast episode, and we hope you enjoy it. Also, make sure that you subscribe to the channel, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and give us a review. You might not think it helps, but it does. It helps out a ton. So please give us a review and subscribe to the channel. Thanks, and talk with you guys soon.